All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to CanBoat Nanaimo's live stream on updating paper charts or using electronic charts in Canada. A little bit of an update on the legal requirements that we have in boating and just helping everybody make sure that they've got all of the most current information and all of the right tools and details on board as we're getting ready for the Canadian boating season to get started. My name is Lyle Wetch. I am the communications officer for CanBoat Nanaimo, as well as a few other things, which I'll talk about in just a couple of minutes. I just want to discuss a couple of things about the way the live stream is going to work for those of you that may not have attended a live stream on YouTube previously. What we want is, if you do have any questions, is to type them into the comment section of the video. And if you can make life a little bit easier and put a Q in front of the question, then that helps me identify that it is a question and not a comment, because I'm monitoring all the streams and the comments and things. And then we'll be able to address those at a couple of different segments throughout the presentation. And we will have time at the end of the presentation to address any questions that we may have missed or any follow-up questions that we've got. So we really do appreciate any engagement, any questions that you've got. This video will be recorded. It's being recorded live right now, and it will be available at the same link on our CanBoat Nanaimo YouTube channel. So you'll be able to forward it to anybody that wasn't able to attend, or if you get called away for whatever reason, as sometimes happens, we'll be able to take care of that for you as well. You'll be able to touch base. So just a little bit about where we're going with things and where things are. There is a copy of the handouts that is available. This link is available in the description of the video. It's basically https://canboat-nanaimo.online and then /chart-updates-handouts. So this is listed in the bottom of the description of the video. And so you can go there. It's a link to my Dropbox folder where the handouts are located, and you can download those and add them to your handouts as well, so that if you've got any details you want to get, any links, any information, you'll have access to all of that there as well. So we still got a lot of people popping in, so that's great. If you just want to sort of type into the comment section, give us an idea on where you're coming from, because we may have people coming in from all across Canada, even though for those of you on the East Coast, we know that it's a little bit late. So if you do have to go to bed before we get done, the recording will be here for you to take a look at things. So just a little bit about myself, about who I am. I've got about 35 years experience in sailing in both coasts and in the Caribbean. I've spent 35 years either being a professional educator in the diving industry, where I taught diving, both recreational and technical diving instructors for over 20 years, as well as the last 20 plus years teaching at a university level. I've done a variety of different programs and courses through American Sailing, ISPA, variety of other groups that are there, as well as being a ISP instructor evaluator for both sail and power through my own school, Latitude Sailing, as well as being an SVOP, a small vessel operator proficiency certificate with Transport Canada, and being a restricted operator certified recognized examiner for the ROCM. So we've been around the water pretty much my entire life, and it's always interesting when there's certain perceptions that people have, certain different ideas, or how some rumors can get going about what the requirements are or what things you need to do to be able to be properly prepared to be on the water, and more importantly, to be legally compliant. Now, one of the things I do want to sort of mention from the legal compliance side of things and why it's important to make sure that you've got all of the details that you need and that you're touching bases, not necessarily that you may get boarded and they may go through the checklist, which is always a possibility, but also in a situation where in the unlikely event that something happens, you may run into a circumstance or a situation where your insurance will void your policy, even though the circumstances of the things that are not legal were not necessarily directly attributed to the cause or the actions around the incident. So there's a few things sort of coming in from that standpoint. So we always want to make sure that we've got the right equipment on board to be able to navigate effectively. And one of the big questions and one of the more challenging pieces, which was really the impetus for this presentation, is some misunderstandings about what you need to have on board with regards to paper charts in Canada. Can you use electronic charts? What do you need to do with your paper charts to make sure that they're current? Because one of the key things, and sometimes people don't necessarily realize this, if you go down to the marina or go down to the Chandler and you pick up your charts, and you got brand new charts today, you buy the entire gamut for the West Coast, they're out of date. They are not current. You've got a lot of work that you need to do to those charts in order to make them legally compliant. They are not going to be current when you buy them off the shelf. You've got work to do. Likewise, you may have additional work to do on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, depending upon how many changes there are and how many different charts you've got on board your vessel. And so this is one of the key things when we think about our charts that we have. If you have not been updating those on a consistently regular basis, whether weekly or monthly, your charts are going to be significantly out of date. You never really realize how many changes are being made to the charts until you subscribe to the chart mechanisms like we're going to be talking about in today's presentation, so you make sure that you don't miss any of the pieces that are coming into play. Likewise, there are now options in Canada for you to not have to carry paper charts for all of the waters that you're operating in. You can actually operate electronic charts, but you've got to have the right ones. And that's where we want to sort of take a look at things today, is to really help to answer some of these questions and to make sure that everybody is as safe as they can possibly be, that you're navigating with the right information, and you're not running into any issues or complications. And I just want to sort of start things off with a paraphrasing, if you will, of the legal regulations. We'll get into the exact clauses and details in a moment. But in general, all of the legal regulations with regards to the navigation and what you have to have on board your vessel state that in Canada, vessels have to carry the most recent and largest scale charts and publications for the areas they are navigating. These charts and publications must be issued by or authorized by the Canadian Hydrographic Service, the CHS. So there's a couple of key things in this statement that we really want to bring our attention to. The most important part is the fact that it says the most recent. So that means that you've got all of the updates made on those charts based on everything that's come out in the notice to mariners from the Canadian Hydrographic Service. So you could have every chart for the entire West Coast or the East Coast, depending upon where you happen to be. But if those charts are not updated, then they do not meet the requirements. Likewise, you have to have the most recent publications on board as well. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But most importantly, and this is the part down on the bottom, that they must be issued by or authorized by the Canadian Hydrographic Service. So this is where, if you're using Navionics, what used to be called Navionics, what is now Garmin Navionics app, then that's not compliant. That does not meet the requirements, because even though the Garmin data is utilizing some of the data from CHS and other sources and resources, it does not meet the legal requirements for what you have to have on board. The CHS actually specifies that in their descriptions. So the only electronic charts that you can utilize are those that are the actual CHS electronic charts. They're the ones that meet the requirements, but you can use them on a variety of different devices. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up, because the Canadian Hydrographic Service has put a lot of effort over the last couple of years as part of their digital initiative to realize and recognize that they need to move to a more digital standpoint. We'll talk about where that's going and what that can actually do for you. So when we talk about where this all comes from, it's not just somebody's supposition, but this is from the actual SOR 2020-216, which is the legal document that talks about what's required. And the part that's appropriate from a navigation standpoint is 142.1, which basically says that the master and authorized representatives of a vessel must ensure that the most recent version of the following charts, documents, and publications in respect to each area where the vessel is scheduled to be navigated are kept on board. So that covers the reference catalog and all of the applicable charts in the catalog in their largest scale. And also for a Canadian vessel in Canadian waters, those are those under the authority of the Canadian Hydrographic Service. And in any other case, the Hydrographic Service or of a foreign state that comes into play. You also have to have the annual edition of Notice to Mariners. And in the case of a Canadian vessel in waters under Canadian jurisdiction, and a vessel that is not a Canadian vessel. So if you're coming up from the US, you have to have Canadian sailing directions published by the Canadian Hydrographic Service. You have to have the Canadian tide and current tables published by the Canadian Hydrographic Service. You have to have the list of lights, buoys, and fog signals published by the Canadian Coast Guard. And if your vessel is required under these regulations or any foreign law to be fitted with radio equipment, you also need to have the radio aids to marine navigation published by the Canadian Coast Guard. So there's a lot of documents that you need to have the most current versions of, not just a case of I had it one. Many of these are updated and published on an annual basis. And, the good news or bad, depending upon your point of view, is these documents are all electronic and available to be downloaded, with the exception of the charts, from the Canadian Hydrographic Service website or the Canadian Coast Guard site. We're going to show you where you can get these. And then it's simply a matter of downloading them onto a phone or onto a tablet of some device and making sure that that phone or tablet or computer that has all of these documents in the most current year are on board the vessel. It's almost today getting, a requirement to have a good tablet on board the vessel to hold all of your planning apps and all of your documentation that you need to have. These documents are no longer published in print form. They're only available electronic. So you need to make sure that you've got the electronic forms available. Now, the main website where you get access to all of these is charts.gc.ca. And when you go there, You can go through and take a look at the nautical charts and service, and then go take a look at the various publications. Let's just take a look at that site to walk you through where you can get that and download the most current information so you've got the right details that are there. So on the Canadian government site, charts.gc.ca, that'll take you to a selection where you choose English or French, depending upon your particular preference. And this is where they have several topics, including the discussion on digital transformation. But right at the top is the link to nautical publications. When you click on that link, it's going to take you to where you can download all of the main information, all of the stuff that was listed as being required in the regulation that we just looked at. You can take a look at the tide and current tables, sailing directions, the paper chart catalogs, chart number 1, and the Atlas of Tidal Currents. And then down below, just to make life super easy for you, you've got all of those required Canadian Coast Guard publications, the Canadian Aids to Navigation System, ice navigation in Canadian waters if you're going up north, as well as the list of lights, buoys, and fog signals, which is required, and the Notice to Mariners monthly editions. And we'll talk about that because that's a key part of keeping yourself updated. Now, as an example, if we take a look at the sailing directions, you can see that they break the sailing directions down into 4 key areas. You've got Atlantic coast, Central Canada, Pacific coast, and Northern Canada. So if we look at the Pacific coast, it's broken down into really just 4 different documents. One, which is sort of the lead-in document that applies to everything. That's the first one, the PAC 200. And that was published in March of 2025, so literally just last month. The other ones were Cape Stewart to Haida Gwaii was in January of this year, and the other 2 were in February. And right now, these are currently being translated into French, so they don't have the French versions for 2025 available yet. So the 2024 versions would be the ones that would be available if you had chosen French as your primary language. Now, depending upon the region where you're at, if we take a look at the Atlantic coast, we see that in the Atlantic coast, there is the main information, and then there is an additional 21 different PDF documents depending upon which area of Atlantic Canada you have the information on. So you can either just download the ones that are important for you, or if you want to make sure that you're not going to miss something, download all of the ones for the region that you're going to be operating in. They're all PDF documents, and so you can access those and read them as you're going along. So that charts.gc.ca is an important website to go to because that's going to give you the key details and getting you the access to those documents that you need to have on board the vessel. There's also a part in the site that's going to help you get your charts sorted out. We'll take a look at that in a minute. We've had a number of people join us again, so I just want to sort of remind everybody that if you do have any questions as we're going through the session, please type them into the comments and just put a capital Q in front of the questions so that I know that you're asking a question, and we'll be able to address those at a couple of points as we're going along. So let's continue taking a look at where we go from things with the sailing directions. As we said, it's going to cover all the different types of documentation. And when we're dealing with the West Coast, we've got those 4 documents that you're going to download. When you take a look at the tides and current tables, there are 7 different tides and current tables that we are dealing with across Canada. Volume 1 deals with the Atlantic coast and the Bay of Fundy. When you get down to the West Coast in British Columbia, this is where, depending upon the location, you may be dealing with either Volume 5, 6, or 7. Because we've got so many challenging areas for tides and currents tables in this spot, we need to make sure that we've got the right documentation on board. Now, even if you're using another tide calculation tool, whether you're using Predict Wind, Predict Tide, or another app that does that, as per the regulations, you still need to have the Canadian ones produced by CHS on board your vessel in order to be legally compliant. So whether you use these as your primary calculation tool for tides and current tables, or whether you're using another device, make sure that you have these downloaded and on your vessel. And again, the 2025 ones are available. One of the things that I always recommend to our students is to make sure that part of your pre-season boat prep is simply downloading the most current documents and having them on board your vessel at all times. That way there, you know you've got the right information for the document side of the regulation. Then you just have to make sure that you've got yourself squared away with regards to your charts and having the right navigation tools on board to work your way through. So any questions so far on the document side of things, on where to access the charts on gc.ca? I don't see anything popping up in the feed, but if you do have anything, we'll be having some more question periods as we go. That was pretty much the easy part that several of you are probably well used to and have the right information downloaded and are ready to go. So let's take a look at the charts themselves, because this is the part where things get a little bit more complicated and require you to perhaps be dealing with some manual labor. We'll talk about the paper charts first and what you need to be doing to make sure that your paper charts are compliant and up to date and you've got all the correct information. And then we'll move into talking about the electronic charts and take a look at what's required from those perspectives. So I've seen a lot of issues. I've been on charter boats where I took a quick look at the charts and said, all the charts you've got on board this charter vessel are out of date. And they said, but we just bought them this morning. And I was like, yes, that's why they're out of date, because you haven't done the updates. So this is a part where even professionals in the industry may not necessarily understand or are maintaining their documentation. So you always want to make sure that if you are chartering a vessel or you're getting on a vessel to use for teaching, or you're a student getting on a vessel, you always want to make sure that that vessel has the charts on board and that all of those charts are updated before you leave the dock. I always carried my charts with me, the ones where I'm going to be on. So in case I get to the charter vessel and they're not up to date, it doesn't have to delay the departure and have us spending all kinds of time updating charts. I can make sure that we've got the right equipment and we can go. So how do you make sure your chart is current and updated? And how do you go about doing that? Well, first of all, every chart, when you take a look at the bottom left-hand corner, where it generally is located, you're going to see the edition information. In this case, for this particular chart, it tells us that the previous edition was the 1984 edition, and then it was revised in 97, and then again in 02. The new edition was 2005. But the most important piece of information that you need to be concerned about is this line that the big white circle is around. And this is one that I put, that you don't get this on the chart, but this goes through and talks about the fact that this was last corrected on July 31st in 2020. And so every single update that has happened to this one chart since January 31st, 4.5 years ago, is not on the chart and has to be updated. And so this is the part where if you've just had your charts rolled up sitting on the shelf or folded up sitting in your devices and you never ever did the updates, Well, you've got a fair bit of catching up to do. And so let's take a look at how we go about doing that. Well, the first thing is when you go to the Canadian Hydrographic Charts, this is chart.gc.ca as well. Remember, we saw there was that one link there for the monthly editions of the Notice to Mariners. All right, we'll take a look at this on the actual website in a moment. And I do see the question that you asked there, Stuart, and we will be digging up and going into a specific example on that in just a second. So you can download the monthly editions of Notice to Mariners. They come out at the end of every month, and you can download it as a PDF file or a zip file. And this is going to have all of the changes that have occurred to all the charts that month. Now that can be a real pain in the butt because you got to try to figure out which ones are the ones that you own and which are the issues that apply to you. But there's a great way to go about doing that. Now, we mentioned that that chart that I used in the example had not been updated since July 31st of 2020. So rather than having to go download every monthly Notice to Mariners document, finding every chart that we've got and physically making all of those changes, if you want to search the chart corrections, you can simply put the chart number in, and from the from date, you would put that last date it was current to the Notice to Mariners, and then you would put the current date and then search. What this does is provides you with a lovely little document that just has all of the updates that you need to make on that particular chart. And so if you've got 30 charts on board your vessel, you would then put the next chart number in and do the same thing, and the next chart number in and do the same thing. And you get a big stack of paper of what you need to do and the changes that you need to make to that particular chart. Now, one of the most amazing things that if you aren't already subscribed to this, I highly recommend that this be one of your priorities, is the hydrographic service actually has an email notification service. So you can go in, you create an account, you put in your email, your password, you register if you haven't already done, or you simply open up a session, and then you tell them, these are all the charts that I have on board my vessel. And you see an example there listing charts ranging from 3441 to 3541. If you put all of that information in, send it to CHS, then they will send you a weekly email of any changes that apply to those specific charts and links to those changes. This is by far the best way to ensure that you've got all the right information, but you've got to make sure that you're up to date to the point of initiating the email notification service by going through and doing all the updates that we looked at previously. So when you get that email that talks about the Notice to Mariners, as an example there, we see in the one that's on the left-hand side, this is an email that I got back on January 10th. And so in this case, between January 4th and January 10th, remember these emails are weekly, there were updates that were done to 5 of the charts that I had in my possession. So about 20% of the charts that I have on board my boat had changes that were made that week. Now, this is the part when you subscribe to this email service, this is when you really start to understand how frequently they are updating these charts and making sure the information is current and up to date. And then it tells you, here's all the charts that had no updates during this week. So this is a great way to make sure that you get all of these weekly updates. And then when the monthly edition of the Notice to Mariners is available, it sends you that as an email attachment as a PDF as well, or a link, I can't remember which one. And you can then put that on board your electronic tablet as far as where we go. So let's take a look at an example to see how this is done and to see how many changes have actually occurred. So if we take a look, let's just take a look here. If we take a look at the Strait of Georgia, this chart that we're looking at is 3512. And if we take a look at the bottom corner of this chart, we'll see if we can zoom in a little bit there for you. So if we go and take a look, down in the bottom corner, we see that this chart was last updated in January 10th of 2020. So the two pieces of information that we need are January 10th of 2020, because that's when everything is current on the chart up until that date. And then we have the chart number, which we already discussed as we took a look at that, was 3512. So if we go back to the website and take a look at where we were, if we go back to Nautical Charts and Services, and as we go, if we take a look at the Notice to Mariners link that's over on the right-hand side, and when you click on the Notice to Mariners, this is where we see all of the releases. So this was where the latest release for 2025 was March, and then you've got January and February from 2025, and then you can actually archive or see all of the archived editions. But what we want to do is if we go back and take a look at our charts, to take a look at the nautical publications, as we go down, we can see, we can download those. We can also access those notices to the Mariners editions that are there as well. Now, if we want to take a look at where we register for the charts, if we take a look at our nautical charts page, and as we go there, we see how we can access the information for the digital charts, which we'll take a look at for the minute, but right down here at the bottom. So that's under the Nautical Charts and Services, under Navigating, and in the bottom left-hand corner, there's the Update Your Nautical Charts. And so this is the part where you can search for chart corrections or print the PDF chart patches. Because here's the fun part. Sometimes there are so many things that need to be updated, you can't just be drawing on these things. So they actually send you files that you print out in color and paste onto the actual chart. So you get to do like arts and crafts like you're back in school with a glue stick and a lovely pair of scissors or an X-Acto knife. So if we take a look here and we put in, and we want to see the notices by our particular chart number, in this case, let's put in 3512 and then click go. This is going to then bring us up to the part where we can do that search. So it says, what range do you want this to be? And we said that it was January 10th of 2020. So from 2020, January 10th to today's date, which is 2025, and we have April 1st, and then we do a search. So what this does is this shows us every single change that has occurred to chart 3512 in the last 5 years. Now you can simply click download as a PDF, and then that will give you that whole file, or you can simply work your way through. So if we just take a look, we can see that 3512 hasn't had a lot of changes to it. It'll show you the most recent one up here, which was on January 10th, where you actually had to change a light from being quick QR to read flashing R. So instead of being quick R, it gives flashing R. You have a spot here where it says you need to affix a patch. So in this case, you would click on that PDF link And this is one of the examples that I talked to you about that says that sometimes there are so many issues that you actually get a document that you have to print out on a color printer and then add onto your actual chart. And this must be a very nasty file because it's taken a while to load. And so this is where it gives you a scale and tells you how to set your printer, setting it to the right size, making sure that you don't do fit to page or scale to fit, because that's going to make it not fit on your actual chart. And then it shows you an actual piece for chart 3512, and you simply cut it out along the red lines and glue it over top of your actual chart. So that's usually one of the quick ways that I can tell if somebody hasn't got updated charts, is if we take a look at where I know there's going to be pasted updates. And if there's nothing pasted on the chart, then I know the chart hasn't been current and up to date. And virtually every chart has had stuff that needed to be printed. In fact, just to let you know, I'm taking a look at one here. So this particular batch was for chart number 3493. So that one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That one has 7 fairly large pieces that need to be glued onto the chart because there were so many changes and so many updates in that particular area. Now, some of your charts are going to have more, some of them are going to have less, but you still need to make sure that you're dealing with all of those corrections. Now, the ones that are, how do we put this? A bit of a pain in the tuchus is when there's changes to submarine cables. If you have to remove one or put it in a different location, it'll give you a ton of latitude and longitudes, and you basically connect the dots at each of those points and then run your navigation. Sometimes you've got to delete an object that is there. And you'll notice here as well, it tells you that there's some things that impact electronic navigation charts and which ones. But those are going to be done automatically. Those are not things that you have to manually do. We'll talk about that. And so you see now we're into 2023. Another patch from 2021. So this chart has 2 pieces that needed to be printed out and put on it, and then there you go. So that one's not too bad. And so you can get through that one fairly good. If we take a look at another example and take a look at 3463, the chart that's dealing with the southern portion of the Strait of Georgia, that one is the 31st of July, 2020. And if we take a look and search for that one, we can see that they've got a number of things that are being amended, deleted, stuff that's being added, and more submarine cable changes that are listed in there. And as we scroll back, we don't see on that chart that there's anything that needs to be printed and glued on. And so this is the piece that you need to make sure that you're doing on a regular basis. And the easiest way to do this, rather than having to go back and fill in all of these things and draw this information onto your chart, is to sign up for that email service. Once you've got your chart updated to today, then that email service will have the information going forward. Now, the same way that I would be able to tell that a chart has not been updated by the glued content on, is the same way that authorities would be able to tell that the charts you're carrying on board are not current and up to date, and therefore not legally compliant as well. So using those tools and going through and doing all those searches is going to be really, really valuable for you to be able to make sure that you've got the appropriate updates that you're dealing with. Now, as we go back and it goes through, it gives you information. And the key is that you're going to be using your chart 1 to to figure out what do these things look like and to be able to draw them on the actual chart. And there's little hints that you can do that we'll show you in a minute. But here's one of the big things. When you do an update on the chart, on the bottom of the chart where it says this is current to the notice to mariners, you put the date of that last update. So whatever the date was when you last did an update on that chart, you would add that and glue that over top the bottom. So that part of your chart is going to get quite thick as you're adding more and more, unless you're peeling off the previous updates that you do, if it gets difficult to fold or to roll depending upon the circumstances. So if we just go back down to our slides for a second, this is where, as we said, you get the PDF that has all the chart corrections or documentation that you have to download, and you get the information that you then need to sort of cut out and paste onto your actual chart itself. Now, in order to make your life a little bit easier, Weems and Plath does have a lovely little tool. It is basically a template device that has all of the scales and has all of the little markings depending upon what you need to be drawing. And so with this and an extra fine Sharpie, you've got the ability to go through and easily make those updates, because I was never a great artistic individual. And so me trying to hand draw all of those navigation aids from chart number 1 would not be a pretty picture. And so what I do is I have the black Sharpie that I use for all the new information that's going on. And then if there's things that are being removed, I hash it out with a red marker that says that that's no longer there. And so this is one of the things that we've got to do to make sure that everything that we're using is current and up to date, because there is a lot of incorrect information and people are working on that. So we've already gone on and had a look at these and taken a look at these details. Are there any questions that you've got about going through and doing the updates? Hopefully this is old news and that all of you have updated every chart that you've got on your vessel every week whenever there's been changes. Or if you're not doing it every week, maybe you sort of do them during the season and then take a break if you're not boating for 4 months or so, and then you sit down and it's part of your boat prep before you leave the dock in the new year is doing all of those updates. So remember, if you do have any questions, just type them into the comments and just put a Q in front. That was there. Take a look. We did have the one comment from Stuart that came in that said, were there any examples of specific updates or changes? Went through a couple of them there for you, Stuart. Hopefully that addressed that question as far as what the information is or what you need. Anybody else have any other questions that come into play? Giving you something to do during any bad weather that may be coming up, I guess. All right. I don't see any other questions popping into the feed at the moment. So let's transition ourselves back and take a look at where things go with regards to electronic charts and sort of addressing this as an option. Because depending upon how annoyed you get with having to update the paper charts, although always having current and up-to-date paper charts are going to be important in case you lose all of your electronics, you batteries die or whatever the case. Paper charts never run out of batteries. And so if you've got your right navigational tools, you've got your compass, your sextant, if that may be the current situation, and your paper charts, and you've been tracking where you're going and what you're doing, you can always go and work on your navigation from there in a catastrophic failure. But there is the option, as we're moving more and more into an electronic world, and the recognition further down in that SOR 2020-2016 is where it addresses electronic charts. And this is where it's references, this is 143.1. And this is where it says a chart referred to in paragraph 142.1a, this was what we looked at earlier, may be in electric form if it is displayed on an ECDIS that in waters for which the ENC, an electronic navigational chart, is available, is operated using the ENC. All that means is that if you've got an electronic charts that are created by CHS and they are in a viewer format that you can use for navigation on board your vessel, then that meets the requirements. So you do not need to have current and up-to-date paper charts if you have the current and up-to-date electronic charts, but only those that are produced by CHS, because those are the only ones that they can guarantee are accurate and have the right information. Now, this has been a big change and a couple of updates that have happened over the last few months, and you now have the ability to acquire these charts from the vendors, put them onto different devices, and we'll talk about which ones those are, and meet those requirements. Now, a couple of key things. Only the CHS charts meet Transport Canada regulations for having them on board your vessel. If you are using other electronic charts, which you are allowed to do, they just do not meet the legal requirement. So you love Navionics. I personally love Navionics. I think it's a great planning tool. I do all my planning with it. I've got Navionics right now on my chart plotter as what I use, but it does not meet the legal requirements of having the most current and up-to-date CHS charts. So I have an alternative to that, which we'll talk about. Now, so this is where, when we take a look at the part where it says, if you're using other the charts, there were two types of electronic charts that the Canadian government were creating. You had the ENCs, which were vector-based charts, and they also previously had raster-based charts. Only the vector charts are currently available. They've discontinued all of the raster charts and are focusing purely on the vector versions. Now, this is what the digital format of the CHS charts are. Now, if you purchase the CHS charts, the cost for them, including monthly updates for 2 years. So they don't update every week, but they do update every month if there's changes to that. If you have an individual chart, it's $25. If you want to have the package for everything for Vancouver Island East, that's available at $600. So it's a trade-off. You've got the time and the paper, or the convenience and the electronic updated versions that you've got. Now, a lot of that depends on how you're going to be viewing the electronic charts and what tools you're going to be using. I just want to take a brief moment to talk about the electronic chart standards. Now, these are standards that the international standards for the hydrographic associations that look at things. Now, S57 is the standard data format across the globe for transferring the digital charts that include the ENCs, the electronic navigational charts. Now, when we take a look, the CHS charts are currently in the S57 format. S63 is simply an encrypted version of the S57. And why this is important is because some chart plotters can read S57, others can only read S63. So you need to make sure, if you're going to be using your chart plotter, as where you want to put the CHS charts, that it's capable of handling the S57 and not just the S63. Now that's at the moment. Where we're at is there's new standards that are being moved to globally, and Canada is well underway under this. And these are the S100 standards. There's S101. There's a variety of different layers that sort of come into play with this. Everybody will eventually be moving to these new S100 standards. So I would fully expect that all of the chart plotters would move away from the S57 or S63 format and migrate up to the S100 standards as well. But that's not at the moment. S100 is not something that is used on most of the tools. It is on a couple that we're going to take a look at, but it's the S57 or 63 that are the most important. Now, one of the easiest tools that you can use to be able to view the charts, and it's actually one of the two tools that the Canadian Hydrographic Service links to actually directly on their site, is OpenCPN, which is a chart plotter navigation tool. It's free, and you can buy charts within it, or it also gives you the ability to upload charts that you have downloaded and purchased from, say, example, the Canadian Hydrographic charts. Now, the advantage of that is it works on Mac, Windows, and Android. The bad part is it does not work on an iPad. So it works on Android tablets. It doesn't work on Apple tablets. So if you've got an Apple laptop, great. You've got a Windows laptop or an Android tablet, it works great on that. And it can read the charts directly. The other app that is mentioned in the CHS website is the Teledyne Keras Easy View, is another fee viewer that you can gain access to. But as far as for iPads or iPhones, one of the best apps that you can download for free is SEA IQ. Now, there's several versions of the SEA app. The SEA IQ is the one that is more for recreational boaters as opposed to a commercial vessel. And why it's one of the best apps to be able to operate on your iPad or your iPhone is it is able to be compliant with S57, S63, and it's even already compliant with many of the S100 charts. So it is able to read anything, but more importantly, it doesn't require you to buy charts within the app. You can take your CHS purchase charts and upload them into your iPhone or your iPad into the SEA IQ app and have all of that data there, which would make you perfectly compliant. Now, iNavX is another navigation tool, and you can also import the S57 charts into the iNavX software, or you can even purchase the charts directly within the iNavX software. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Jim, it looks like you asked a question there. Where you said that, or under the authority of a hydrographic office or every relevant government institution of a foreign state. That was not dealing with the charts. That was dealing with the charts. So if you're an American boater and you've got all of the current charts for the waters that you're operating in, if they were issued from the United States as an example, then that would qualify. But those charts are not available for Canadian waters. And so where that applies is sort of, if there's a foreign government that has chart data perhaps in the northern waters in the Arctic that is relevant and it covers a particular area where there may be an overlap between the charts that the American charts are covering and the Canadian charts have, then you would be okay. But you need to make sure that you've got the charts from the Canadian side of things. Now, some chart plotters may accept downloaded CHS charts, but you need to make sure that they're S57 compliant, not S63. And so that's one of the things to be able to make sure if you want to use it on your chart plotter. Now, remember that you can always have your tablet, with the charts downloaded and available on your tablet. A lot of people use that for navigation anyway. Others use it as a backup to their chart plotter so they can have like a second chart plotter, but a less expensive screen to be able to have that second screen that's available. And so one of the things that we recommend, if you're uncertain whether your chart plotter is going to accept the S57 compliant charts, is on the CHS site, you can actually download chart 999.5 as a sample chart. It's a free download. So before you buy the charts, you can go in and you would download it. The raster version no longer applies anymore, but the second one there, where it's in S57 ENC, that would be the one that you would want to download. You download the zip format, and then you could check to see, does that upload into your chart plotter? Can your chart plotter read the S57 or the CHS charts? So that's where, and you also see there, it talks about the Teledyne and the Open CPN rather, as the optional viewers that are available for that. Now, once you've purchased the electronic charts from a CHS vendor, and there's a list of them that are there, you then go in to activate your charts on the CHS digital portal. And we'll go through this quickly, but it is one of the things that's a little bit different. There's a registry, and there's a link to this, and we showed you this as we were taking a look at the CHS website. They do have a digital portal, and when you go to that, it's managed by DFO, and you use your secure sign-in. So it's a Government of Canada site, so you can either sign in with your bank card or sign in with a GC key account if you've got one of those to be able to get in. You go through the registration to self-register, and you agree to their terms of service. You give them your name and address and postal code, fills all the details in, and then it takes you to a page where you can add your product. Now, what happens is when you buy an electronic chart from a vendor, you will get a transaction code. You simply put that transaction code into the space, and then that allows you to say, by putting this code in, I agree to do that, and it adds the products. And so that way there in this site, it's going to keep track of all of the products that you've got, and they will be updated every month based on any changes that are happening with your with the particular charts that you may be using. Remember, with the price that you're paying, it comes with 2 years of updates. Whether there's going to be a less expensive update fee at the end of 2 years, we'll have to wait and see. This is new. Now the US has taken a very different stance. The NOAA charts are available for free. You cannot even purchase paper charts anymore. Most of the areas in the San Juan Islands, stopped manufacturing the paper charts, and they stopped being available June or July of 2024. That's when the majority of them were ending production and we're going 100% onto the electronic. So if you're sailing in US waters, you can access and download the NOAA charts. They're available for free, and you can access them through a variety of apps. iNavX is an easy one. You can just click a button and download. There's no charge for accessing all of the NOAA charts for the US, or you can access them through a number of locations. But you cannot even get paper charts unless they're left over in the US for many regions right now. Most of them are being discontinued. So a lot of little things that are coming up. What it comes down to from a decision is really a couple of things. What's your time worth to do all of the updates? And the fact that, are you going to risk not having current paper charts with you anyway as a backup, because paper charts never run out of power? So this is a couple of key things. So let's take a look and see if anybody has any questions. So let's go and take a look at the questions. Okay, so I don't see anything else popping in there. So if you do have any questions coming up down the road, you can reach me by text, WhatsApp, or phone. My phone number is there. You can also reach me either through my CanBoat Nanaimo email, which is communications@canboat-nanaimo.ca, or lyle@latitudesailing.ca. And you can access the websites there, and you can find contact details for that as well. I'm in on the canboat-nanaimo.ca site, as well as my Latitude Sailing site. So thanks very much, everybody, for joining us today. Hopefully we answered some questions and you're not too mad at me for giving you homework to do. In many cases, I'm sure some of you have some arts and crafts work to do on the charts that you've got. But the main thing is you're going to have the right information. Sign up for those e-notifications and make sure that what you've got is current and up to date. And that's the most important thing that you can actually do to make sure that you're there. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. If you've got any other questions, let us know. Other than that, have yourself an amazing week. And any last comments coming in, we'll just sort of pop them up. Thanks, Alan. Appreciate it. If you got any questions, let us know. Other than that, take care, everybody.